Got called for that interview and you're just here wondering, okay, so now that I've been called for interview, what are the things I need to do? What are the things I shouldn't do when I go in for the interview? In this video, I'll be sharing all of that with you. Hello there, welcome back again to my channel. My name is Adi Damola. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for joining me here today. In this particular video, I'm going to be talking to you about, as you can already see from the title of the video, the do's and don'ts at interviews. So you're watching this video because maybe you're a fresher, or you're preparing for your next interview, or you have an interview like maybe tomorrow, or you have an interview that you have to prepare for. If you're here for any of those reasons, then you're definitely in the right place, okay? Because in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you the do's and don'ts at interviews. So number one, the first thing I will tell you is to ensure that you arrive at the interview venue early. Now, when I say early, I don't mean 2 hours before the time. I don't mean 3 hours before the time. I mean like 30 minutes before the time, or at most 1 hour before the time. And this is really because it gives you better chances of really settling down and really get yourself set for the interview. Sometimes you get in for an interview, you can feel very anxious, you can have a whole lot of anxiety all over you. So you getting in early enough would help you to really settle in and get yourself prepared for the interview. The second thing I'll be telling you is to be confident. Now, for them to have called you for an interview means that they found something in you, they found something on your CV that they would like you to really talk more about. And this is a this is a good step for you, because it means that they like your CV and then they just want to meet you in person. So it is important that you're very confident when you go for interviews. Now, I know that maybe you're a fresher, it could be your first interview and you're just wondering, okay, how am I going to do it? Or you're just wondering, should I talk when I'm not being asked to? Or how long should I talk for? You really just need to be very confident in yourself. This is the time for you to just more like sell yourself to the person who is interviewing you, sell yourself to the recruiter, and let them know that, okay, we made the right choice by calling you for an interview. Okay, never be afraid, never be afraid to speak, never be afraid to ask questions. Just do your best to ensure that you're confident when you go for an interview. Number three, the third thing I'll be saying is that you should sell yourself. Okay, you got called because your CV was great, and then they want to hear you, they want to see how you communicate, they want to see those things that you have, they want to be able to like see the person who said they can do this and this on their CV. So this is a chance for you to more like tell the interviewer what you can do. Tell them about your past experiences. You're suitable for that role because your CV was found to be suitable for that role in the first place. And so they just need to see you in person, have a word with you, and just more like understand how you can be fit for that role. So this is the point where you're telling them, okay, so these are the things I've done in the past, these are the things that I can do, these are the achievements that I've made, and well, of course, in relation to your career growth and progression. So this is a chance where you get to tell the interviewer that I can do this job. This is the time where you get to tell the interviewer, you get to like market yourself and just let them know that, okay, this is me and these are the things I can do for your company. Number four, be very mindful of what you say at interviews, right? So sometimes the interviewer can appear to be very nice and they're just asking you some questions and you're feeling very comfortable and you're feeling very, you're now becoming very, you're communicating to them in a very personal way. I advise you, please don't do that. Like, really ensure that you're there for the reason why you're there. Speak to them. The questions they ask you is the question that you should answer. Ensure that you're very careful when you're speaking with an interviewer, because every of the details you're giving, every of the things you're telling them is actually a way of measuring whether you are fit for that role. So they're not there because they're your friend. They could be very friendly, but an interviewer, an HR person is not there because they are your friend. They're there because they want to know whether you're suitable for that role, and they want to know whether you're fit for their company. So be very careful and beware of you being too over familiar with the recruiter or the interview. Number five, this may sound very funny, but I would say please do well to remember the name of the person interviewing you. So sometimes you can get an interview where you have a panel of maybe five people. I think five is a lot, or maybe like four or three people on the panel, and so maybe they already even told you their names, and the four of them have told you their names. And maybe there are chances or there are instances where you have to like mention somebody's name to say, okay, George, I think, or Rachel, I'd say. Be very careful when you are trying to mention their names. If you don't remember their names, just leave that out. Don't even call their name. Some of them take it really personal, and I don't know, it could also affect the chances of getting a job. So while this may not be very peculiar to you having a panel of like maybe three or four people interviewing you, it can be very peculiar to you having one person, and maybe you just had more like a mix up trying to like remember the person that is interviewing you. Maybe you're trying to remember their names and you can't, and maybe you just mistakenly use somebody else's name, maybe somebody in the same office, right? Or there is a mix up in the names. But I made it that some recruiters, some HR people actually take this very personal. So if you don't remember their names, if you don't remember their names, don't call their names when you go for interviews. If you have to call their names, or if it's necessary for you to speak to them, just to really more like answer your questions looking at them, or answer your questions just smiling and looking at them, and rather not mention anybody's name. Okay, another thing is that you should talk about your achievements. I know we already mentioned something like this when we're talking about you selling yourself. It is very important that you talk about your achievements when you go for interviews. Now, this is not you bragging and saying, okay, I've done this or I can do this, but this is just you coming up to say, I've done this in the past. And so it won't be hard for me to also bring this skill back into this new business or into this new job I'm about to start at, right? So your achievement is you selling yourself again. Your achievement is you telling them I can add value in this particular area. Your achievement is you saying, okay, even if you don't have an experience in that area, your achievement is you saying, okay, I did this in college. Because I did this in college, this also relates to this job I'm about to apply for, then I can actually add value to your organization. Your achievement is also another thing that helps you to get that next job that you're looking forward to. So, for example, maybe in your previous role you were a salesperson, and maybe the current role you want to get into is marketing or maybe business development. The fact that you've been able to do a whole lot of sales and bring in a whole lot of revenue to your previous company is actually a transferable skill to your new role. So you telling them that, okay, I brought about 1 billion naira to my company in the past, or I brought about $1 billion to my company in the past, I can also use the same strategies, or or I have an idea of a strategy to use to bring value, to bring money, to bring income into this company as well. That is just an example. So ensure that you talk about your achievements when you get in for. The last thing I'll be talking to you about in terms of the things that you should do when you go in for an interview is to ask questions. Yeah. So I know that this is like ask questions, and then you get some people asking very funny questions. While this is not like a must, it's not like a criteria for you even getting the job. Sometimes it could be. I would say that you just ensure that you ask questions that are very related to the job. Ask questions that are related to the company. Ask questions that are related to even the culture of the company, or related to the job role. Like, why is the role vacant? How soon are they likely to recruit? How soon are they likely to fill up the role? And then sometimes let me like, how many people are you guys looking for? If you don't know that before time, how many people are you looking for to fill this role? And just questions about the business, about the company, about the job, about the role, about the culture, basically around the business you're about to get into. Ensure that you don't ask questions that will shoot you in the foot. Ensure that you don't ask questions that will make the interviewer to say, haven't you checked our website? Because there's some questions you ask and they'll tell you, okay, you have all there, we have all of this information on our website. So do well to go check our website. Now that would not be nice for you to do. So ensure that you prepare for the questions, you prepare a question ahead of time so it's easier for you to be able to ask the right question at the interview. Now the first thing I'll be talking to you about is that you should never. Now, note my never beg an interviewer at interviews. And you get your feedback like as soon as you're done with your interview, the interviewer tells you, we can't take you for this role because you don't have this experience, or because we feel you'll be suitable for another role, but not this particular one. So, what you can do for yourself at that point is to ask the interviewer for a constructive feedback. Like, okay, what do you think I can do better? Okay, where do you think I went wrong? Think you should work on? That is exactly what you should do. Never go for an interview and finding out that you are not taken for that job, or getting an instant feedback from them, and then you're like, please, I really want this job. It is very wrong. Never do that because you won't get the job eventually and you would only embarrass yourself. Saying is that you should never talk bad about your previous job or about your previous employer. I know some employers can be very hard. I know that you can work in an environment and the next thing you want to do is go for interviews and tell them my employer didn't make the job easy for me. That's not something to talk about when you go for interviews. Ensure that even if your employer is at fault, ensure that even if your employer is a wicked person, never mention it at interviews because these guys are also interviewing you to know the kind of person you are, to know whether you're fit for the company, to know whether you're going to go out there to start telling people that company is bad when you eventually leave or when something eventually happens. So it's also painting a picture about you. It's also making them to know whether you are mature enough to be able to undo that personal aspect of your life and not coming to the interviewer to talk about how bad your previous employer have been or how bad the job that you did in the past have been. It's time for you to talk badly about your previous employer. Always ensure that you don't fall into that trap of talking badly about your employer when you go for an interview. It is a no-no. Don't do it. Another thing is that you should never say yes or no when you're being asked a question. So sometimes they ask you a question and you're like, okay, yes, or your answer is no. Always ensure that you give them an explanation for every of your yes and an explanation for every of your no. So they're not asking you a question like, so are you sure that you can work in a very competitive environment? And you're saying, yes, I can work in a very competitive environment. And then full stop. They want to know the reason behind your yes. They want to know the reason behind your no. Remember that your prospective employer wants to really know about you, wants to know about how fit you are for their company, wants to know about how fit you have for that role, and even the business of never give a yes or no answer when you're being asked questions. Always ensure that you expatiate on it. Always ensure that you make longer explanations when you're being asked questions. Even if they only require a yes or no, try to just put a little bit of an explanation. I would say is to ensure that you're not asking a question that would shoot you in the foot. I know I said that it is important. I know I said one of the things about you going for an interview, which is a do, is to ensure that you have a question beforehand to ask the employer. It is better for you to not have a question. It's better for you to say, okay, I don't have a question at the moment, than for you to say something that would shoot you in the foot, or that for you to ask a question that would be, I don't want to say foolish in quotes, but a question that would not be great, or a question that would just more like spoil your whole interview, right? So I would advise that if you don't have a question, if maybe you don't even have anything to ask, I'd rather you say you don't have a question than ask something that will shoot you in the foot. Never lie when you go for an interview. I know that sometimes when you're being asked the competency based question about, okay, tell us about a time when you, tell us about a time when you, and you're just like, okay, maybe you don't even have an answer to it, and the next thing you're trying to cook up some stories in your head and it's not even calculating. Please ensure to avoid that you are lying at interviews, and that's why it is very important for you to prepare adequately before going for interviews. So I know for me, I used to have a note. I still have the notes where I write out all my experiences in terms of how I've used my communication skills, in terms of how I've used my presentation skills, and all of that. And then being asked at interviews, I already have something written down that I have practiced before going for interviews. So it's usually always easy for me to just really more like tell the interviewer that ask the question, tell us about a time when you did this. Now I know that sometimes you don't have all the answers to the questions, right? But if you prepare before going for an interview, you won't really you won't really be caught unawares when you're being thrown some certain questions, because in a way this is a job that you do. This role you're applying for, you must have a bit of experience, or even if you don't have an experience, you must be it must be an interest to you before you even go for that interview. So you should be able to have one or two things that make you fit for that job. So when they're asking you these questions, you're bringing in those one or two things that make you fit for that job. You're bringing your stories together, and everything is all making sense to the interviewer. So don't think that lying at interviews will get you a job. If you talk about something that you have not done before, and then maybe the interviewer just ask you a question, I don't know, it feels like you're going to have to like say different lies to be able to cover up and just get yourself out of that interview place. So it's advisable that you shouldn't even think about lying about what you have not done at interviews. So again, I'll be talking in relation to salary. I know that sometimes it's about the money, right? But if you have not been asked about your salary expectation, I rather you don't ask that question, because sometimes what if there's another stage of interview? What if they don't even want you on that job? You know? What if they're just waiting for you to ask that question so that you can shoot yourself in the foot? So in the part where they are asking you questions and they're like, okay, do you have any questions for us? Don't ask salary question. Don't ask them how much are you paid, because if they have not already asked you that question, it's going to look to them as if, okay, you're here for the money. I know we all love money and we all want money, right? But don't let that be your focus for you going to get that job. So don't ask that question when you go for interview, except you have been specifically asked by the interviewer to talk about your salary expectation. Okay, so that's that for the do's and don'ts and interviews. I hope you found this really useful. The last thing I really want to share with you is that remember that you going for an interview is also a chance for you to evaluate the company and see whether the company is also good for you. Okay, so except maybe the interview was done in a restaurant or a place outside the office environment or a place outside the company, ensure that you check everything you need to check, everything you can see at that point in the company. That's why I said arrive early enough. If you arrive early enough, you can more likely see the kind of culture you can more likely see the kind of culture that takes place in that company. You can see one or two things that, if you're very sensitive, will tell you, okay, this company is not for you, or this environment is not for you. So you are going there as an interviewee, but you're also going there as an interviewer, because you're going there to check whether this company is suitable for you. And if this company is not suitable for you, it is also at this point that you make up your mind and say, I can't work for that company. I saw this. So that's one of the things that a number of people don't understand, that you going for an interview is also a time for you to check around and see whether that company is also good for you. We take this into consideration when you go for your next interview. Leave a message in the comment section below about some, maybe like a funny experience that you had, or something that you did that you shouldn't have done at interview, or maybe some of the do's and don'ts that you've also learned over time when you went for interview. And I'll be so happy to read from you. And if you're yet to subscribe to my channel, please do that right now. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share with your friends. Always remember to subscribe if you have not done that. And I'll see you again in my next video. Thank you.